When naval missiles ignite over the Persian Gulf and air raid sirens sound, the immediate focus is on military hardware and immediate casualties. Public debate typically frames these escalating tensions between the United States, Israel, and Iran as collisions over land borders, theology, or regional security. But the massive American military footprint in the region also acts as the physical defense system for the financial architecture that underpins the United States' status as a global power. This invisible architecture is the petrodollar system. For 50 years, a specific arrangement has tied the flow of global energy directly to the strength of American currency. It leads to a mechanical question. Why does the purchasing power of the money in your bank account rely on who controls the oil beneath the Arabian desert? To understand the deployment of aircraft carriers today, we have to look back to a 1965 crisis that broke the post-war economy, leaving Washington desperate for a new way to back its money. In 1944, Allied delegates met at Bretton Woods to design a new financial world. They established the US dollar as the global reserve currency by strictly pegging its value to physical gold at $35 an ounce. By the 1960s, the United States was printing dollars to fund the Vietnam War and underwrite corporate expansions overseas. The Treasury was issuing paper far faster than it was mining the gold required to back it. French President Charles de Gaulle saw the math failing. In 1965, he initiated Operation 19, sending ships and cargo planes to New York to hand back paper dollars and demand physical gold from the Federal Reserve. As other nations joined the bank run, the United States began hemorrhaging reserves. At its peak, hundreds of millions of dollars in gold were leaving the vaults every month. To stop the drain, President Richard Nixon went on national television in August 1971 and suspended the dollar's convertibility into gold. The Bretton Woods Agreement dissolved. For the first time, the world's reserve currency was severed from physical value, leaving it vulnerable to collapse. 2 years later, the Yom Kippur War erupted. In response to American support for Israel, Arab oil-producing nations launched a severe oil embargo. The price of oil quadrupled overnight. American gas stations ran dry, and a decade of high inflation began to dismantle the domestic economy. Searching for a way to stabilize the currency, U.S. Treasury Secretary William Simon traveled to Saudi Arabia in 1974 to negotiate a secret, highly strategic financial loop. The deal had 3 requirements. First, Saudi Arabia would price oil exclusively in U.S. dollars. Second, they recycle profits by purchasing U.S. Treasury bonds. In exchange, the U.S. provided military protection. This forced every nation to acquire dollars for energy, creating demand that replaced gold. The massive influx of foreign oil wealth flooded into New York. Wall Street became the world's primary allocator of capital, with American banks recycling global oil profits into international loans. This loop allowed the U.S. to run persistent deficits by backing the modern dollar with foreign oil instead of domestic production. Maintaining a system where oil must flow in your currency requires a willingness to use force. The American military presence in the Middle East serves as the enforcement mechanism for this financial requirement. In 2000, Iraq's Saddam Hussein announced a shift to pricing oil in euros. While the U.S. cited weapons of mass destruction to justify the invasion, the subsequent war resulted in Iraqi oil immediately returning to dollar-denominated sales. Libya's Muammar Gaddafi faced a similar timeline. He was killed and his government overthrown in 2011, shortly after he began lobbying for a gold-backed African currency to challenge the dollar's role in energy markets. Over the last 20 years, high-stakes military operations and political collapses in the region have repeatedly coincided with attempts to bypass the dollar-oil link. These events suggest the petrodollar is not a voluntary market preference, but a requirement maintained by the explicit threat of intervention. Today, the U.S. uses the dollar system as a geopolitical tool, freezing the central bank reserves of rivals like Russia and cutting nations like Iran off from global banking. This financial weaponization has motivated adversaries to unite. Nations in the BRICS coalition are now building alternative payment infrastructures to bypass American surveillance and settle trades in local currencies. Iran is currently pursuing a strategy to unite regional Islamic powers into an economic bloc designed to operate entirely outside the dollar system. Saudi Arabia, the original architect of the 1974 deal, is also shifting. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has begun discussing selling oil in currencies other than the dollar for the first time in 5 decades. If the global requirement for dollars to purchase oil disappears, the U.S. loses the ability to finance its $36 trillion national debt through foreign capital. The survival of the American financial empire is now tethered to the outcome of these Middle Eastern conflicts.